The narcissist wants the benefits of relationships, work, family, and admiration. But responsibility, the part that requires humility and self-examination, is the one thing they work very, very hard to avoid. There's nothing more frustrating than being around a narcissist who can never take accountability in their lives, and they leave you to constantly be the one to pick up the pieces and to take responsibility for their behavior as though you're responsible to, I don't know, spoon feed them how they're supposed to behave. You're not their mommy or their daddy here. You can't even talk to them about their behaviors because these discussions always take a series of ridiculous turns. They don't agree with what you're saying because your tone isn't right. Your intentions are wrong. Your memory is wrong. You're wrong. It's never ending. There isn't any thought that maybe clearing the air or understanding one another or improving on the relationship is even an option. It's about responses that redirect the conversation to avoid addressing the issue. So they're always redirecting. And before long, the issue that you wanted to address has completely disappeared. Today, I want to look at 7 phrases that narcissists often use to avoid accountability and how these subtle changes in language can completely derail an entire discussion. And after that, I also want to talk about other ways that they're irresponsible. I mean, you just want to talk bad about these people, right? Because it feels good. So hi everyone, Deanna King here, and this channel is all talk narcissism and codependency. And that being said, let's jump right into these phrases. Number 1, you're twisting my words. This phrase, it shifts the focus away from the original issue and it puts you on the defensive. Instead of addressing the question, the conversation becomes about whether you misunderstood them. Now you're explaining what you heard instead of them explaining what they meant. The second one is, that's not what happened. Now the discussion moves away from the issue and into arguing about reality itself. Instead of talking about the behavior, you're suddenly debating whose memory is correct here. Number 3, you always do this. Absolute language, like always and never, expands the conflict here. Instead of discussing one situation, the conversation suddenly becomes a debate about your entire character. The original concern gets buried under a list of exaggerated patterns that aren't even related. Number 4, you're too sensitive. This is a form of emotional dismissal. The message underneath is that the problem isn't the behavior, it's your reaction to it. So instead of looking at what was said or done, the focus shifts to whether your feelings are valid at all. With them, your feelings are never valid. Number 5, we've already talked about this. This phrase often appears when the conversation never actually reached resolution. It suggests that the issue has already been settled, even if it hasn't, which it hasn't with the narcissist, right? And by framing it that way, the other person positions you as the one who won't let things go. Number 6, you're making a big deal out of nothing. And this phrase, it minimizes the situation before it can even be discussed. Instead of looking at the concern, the conversation becomes about whether the issue was ever important in the first place. And once something is labeled as nothing, the person raising it is made to feel unreasonable for bringing it up at all. They're being shamed. And number 7, you're overthinking it. This phrase reframes your attempt to understand the situation as a personal flaw. Rather than answering the question, the focus shifts to your thinking process. The implication is that if you would just stop analyzing things, the problem would disappear. These responses might sound different on the surface, but they all serve the same purpose. Notice something about these patterns. None of them answer the original question. They all shift the conversation somewhere else. Accountability is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. It's the ability to look at a situation and say, yes, I might have contributed to that. Let's talk about it. What all these phrases have in common is that they protect one thing above all else, the narcissist's lack of responsibility. Because at the core of narcissistic behavior is a deep resistance to accountability, not just in conversations, but in life in general. Responsibility requires something that narcissistic personalities, they struggle with, the willingness to examine their own role in a problem. And that kind of self-reflection, it threatens the image that they work so hard to maintain. So instead of acknowledging mistakes, we often see a pattern of chronic irresponsibility. And this can show up in all kinds of ways. Promises are made and broken. Commitments are abandoned. Obligations that most adults would simply handle are ignored, they're delayed, or they're shifted onto someone else. And when the consequences appear, responsibility rarely follows. There's always a reason. And over time, the people around them end up carrying the weight of that irresponsibility. They become the ones fixing problems, managing situations, smoothing things over, or absorbing the emotional fallout. You aren't a partner or a child. You're a parent changing diapers here. You're dealing with someone who expects the privileges of adulthood without accepting the responsibility that comes with it. And one of the most common traits that you'll see in narcissistic personalities is chronic blame shifting. No matter what the situation is, they're never at fault. If something goes wrong, there's almost always another explanation. Someone else misunderstood. Someone else failed to do their part. Someone else caused the problem in the first place. And they'll talk about problems endlessly. They love to complain, especially the coverts. But their role in those problems are never part of the discussion. Another common trait is selective responsibility. The narcissist is often very willing to take ownership of things that make them look impressive. Successes they're claimed quite quickly, but when something goes wrong, the sense of ownership disappears just as quickly. Responsibility becomes flexible. It exists when things go well, and it vanishes when things don't. Another pattern that often appears is the rewriting of history. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this one. When responsibility begins to come into focus, the story itself quickly changes. Details are adjusted, events are remembered differently, and over time, the version of events that places responsibility on the narcissist disappears, replaced by a version where they were misunderstood, they were mistreated, or unfairly blamed. Then there's chronic excuse making. There's always an explanation ready. They were stressed. It was other people, bad timing, unfair circumstances. And while everyone occasionally has reasons for mistakes, the difference here is that the explanation never leads to ownership. Never, never, never. And often people experience emotional outsourcing. When problems arise, the emotional weight of these problems, they often get transferred to someone else. So instead of the narcissist sitting with the discomfort of their own actions, the people around them end up managing the fallout. They smooth things over, they repair the relationship, they carry the guilt, the stress, or the responsibility that never gets put where it actually belongs, on them. And the expectations of unlimited understanding is mind-blowing. Narcissists, they expect patience, forgiveness, and flexibility from others, but those same allowances never flow in the opposite direction. Their mistakes are supposed to be understood. Their behavior is supposed to be excused. Yet the people around them are held to an entirely different standard. Then consequences. They avoid consequences at all costs. I mean, responsibility naturally leads to consequences, apologies, repair, change. That's how it's supposed to work, right? But when someone refuses responsibility, those consequences are often avoided as well. These situations are minimized, they're redirected, or they're ignored until attention moves somewhere else. Now, a while ago I said never, never, but occasionally the narcissist might appear to take responsibility. Keep that in mind, appear, that word. They might briefly acknowledge a mistake or say the right words, but because the deeper pattern of accountability isn't really there, the behavior rarely changes. And over time, people realize that the responsibility was more performative than genuine. A lot of times it was a tactic to get something that they wanted. And over time, this pattern can become extremely exhausting for the people around them because relationships require a shared willingness to reflect, to adjust, and sometimes admit when we've contributed to a problem. Accountability is the foundation of healthy relationships. Without it, everything else eventually becomes unstable. It's the foundation of trust. It's how people repair mistakes, they grow, and they maintain healthy relationships. But when someone consistently avoids responsibility, the relationship is basically one-sided. One person is reflecting, adjusting, and trying to make things work, while all the other person is doing is protecting their image. Accountability requires humility, and humility is something the narcissist spends a great deal of energy trying to avoid. And over time, people realize that they've been participating in a relationship where one person is allowed to make mistakes and the other is expected to absorb them. I mean, is that fair to you? And what's sad is that when someone refuses responsibility long enough, the people around them eventually start questioning their own expectations rather than the behavior of the narcissist. But deep down, though, we do know that it isn't right, that everything they're doing isn't right. And yet, as much as we do know, there's still a part of us that can't even explain to someone else what exactly that you're going through. It's incredibly confusing. Imagine you're sitting across the room from a friend having coffee and explaining what's been happening in your relationship lately. You might say something like, well, he hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. Now, on the surface, that statement doesn't necessarily sound alarming, right? I mean, periods of silence can happen in relationships from time to time. But the difference, though, is that in a reasonably healthy relationship, if that kind of distance occurs, it's usually because something pretty significant happened. And it certainly isn't a weekly pattern. In your relationship, it is constant. And furthermore, your friend's partner isn't looking at them with open contempt every time that they're in the same room. In those healthier relationships or situations, both people are usually upset about the issue itself and are at some point looking for a way to work through it. But what you're experiencing is a whole different ballgame here. What you're experiencing is trauma. Those contemptuous looks are meant to make you feel despised. The stonewalling is meant to make you feel rejected and inadequate. And is that someone who has compassion? Is that love? That's self-absorption. That's manipulation. And the argument that started the whole thing often had nothing to do with a real issue between the two of you. It was simply an opportunity. Get this, it was an opportunity for you to be attacked. And these are the things that you need to be noticing here, because these so-called little moments or little incidences here, the ones that you tend to brush aside once things calm down, are actually the very things that create the deeper trauma for you. But when you're sitting there with your friend explaining this over coffee, they don't hear any of that. All they hear is that you and your partner are going through something the couple sometimes go through. From their perspective, it can even sound like a normal disagreement, maybe even like you're being a bit negative or overly sensitive here. They don't see the emotional environment that you're actually living in. They don't feel the tension that you're going through in your home. They just hear small pieces of information. Maybe you go on to explain that your partner got angry with you because you didn't answer a question that they asked simply because you didn't hear them. And again, on the surface, that doesn't sound like a huge issue. So to the person listening, it might even appear as though you were the one being dismissive or unresponsive. And even if they do understand that you genuinely did not hear the question, they might still assume that it was just one of those moments where someone's just having an off day. What they didn't see is that this was an opening that the abuser was waiting for, an opportunity to provoke conflict, extract emotional energy, and drain you in the process. And that's something important that you need to understand here. That's what's happening to you. You're not simply a partner in these moments, you are the target. And unfortunately, you were selected for that role. And then try explaining a circular conversation to someone when you're left so confused that you can't even put into words what took place. You might remember fragments, like things like, I never said that, or that didn't happen. But recalling the entire conversation from start to finish, impossible, because your brain was pushed into cognitive dissonance. There was too much happening at once and no time to process any of it. But anyway, I've kind of gone off topic here, but still, it's food for thought. So I want to leave you with all of this to ponder on, and please do think about it. Please start being aware of what's going on around you. You deserve some time to think for yourself. I am wishing you all a great day, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.